What happens to a galaxy built on a lie, when the lie finally begins to collapse? The question spreads across the stars like a whispered curse, drifting through the void, carried on the dying echo of a throne that once shone brighter than suns. For 10,000 years, humanity has lived beneath the shadow of a God who never spoke, never moved, never opened his eyes. 10,000 years of worship, sacrifice, and unending war, all bound to the silent, golden corpse at the heart of the Imperium. They believed he would return. They believed he would rise again. They believed his guiding flame would burn forever. But belief has limits, and the galaxy has begun to feel the tremor of truth. It starts as a faint shiver, so small, so insignificant, that only a handful of psychers sense it. A stuttering, a dimming, a quiet falter in the great psychic beacon that has guided ships through the nightmare of the warp since the dawn of the Imperium. The Astronomican flickers, once, twice, a brief hiccup in the Imperium. Navigators pause mid-voyage, their third eyes straining as the familiar glow of the Emperor's power wavers like a candle caught in a breath of cold air. They say nothing at first. They tell themselves it is an anomaly, a rare disturbance, a momentary lapse, but deep down, something primal claws at the walls of their sanity, an instinct older than civilization, whispering that something vast and terrible is changing. On Terra, the Adeptus Custodes stand motionless as statues around the foot of the Golden Throne, but even they feel it. Not in their minds, not in their bodies, but in the deep resonance of the throne itself, as if some ancient mechanism buried within its labyrinthine machinery has begun to grind against its own age. A vibration, faint and almost imperceptible, runs through the marble floors of the inner palace. The air feels heavier, the silence feels deeper, the chamber's golden light dims for a heartbeat, casting the throne's skeletal occupant into an unnatural shadow. And yet, no alarms sound. No announcements are made. The ritual chanting of the tech priests continues uninterrupted. The soul-bound psychers feeding their life into the machine keep screaming as they always have. Everything appears normal, but nothing is normal. A truth is growing in the dark, pressing against the edge of awareness, demanding to be felt even if it cannot yet be spoken. Across the Imperium, strange reports begin to surface. Ships arriving months late, astropaths unable to hear the Astronomican beyond certain distances, entire trade routes becoming unreliable. At first, these incidents are dismissed as typical warp instability. But then the rumors begin, quietly, fearfully, spreading from world to world. Officers whisper it in command bunkers. Priests mutter it behind locked cathedral doors. Navigators refuse to speak of it at all. A single phrase, spoken in hushed dread, begins to ripple outward from Terra. The Emperor's light is fading. No one dares believe it. No one dares even consider it. But denial is fragile, and humanity is already trembling under the weight of its own desperation. The very idea that the Emperor, master of mankind, conqueror of the galaxy, god of the Imperium, might be slipping beyond the reach of existence threatens to unravel everything. If the light dies, humanity dies. And yet, the most terrifying truth of all is this. No one knows why it's happening. No one knows how long it has been happening. And worst of all, no one knows how much time is left before the light goes out completely. In this vast, cold darkness, as fear begins to whisper through every corner of the Imperium, one question hangs above them all like a guillotine suspended by a fraying thread. What happens if the Emperor never wakes up? The first true sign of doom does not arrive with thunder, or prophecy, or revelation. It arrives quietly, like the soft, steady slowing of a colossal machine that has been running too long. The Imperium is too vast, too chaotic, too perpetually burning to notice small changes. But eventually, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Warp travel begins to drift off course by fractions of a second, then minutes, then hours. Entire convoys report unusual temporal distortions. Fleets launch with precise calculations, only to emerge months late, or in the wrong star system entirely. To the outside observer, these failures look random, but to the navigators who guide those ships, the truth is unmistakable. The Astronomican is weakening. The Emperor's psychic lighthouse, once brighter than all the stars combined, now flickers like an old, guttering flame. At first, the navigator houses issue denials. Publicly, they declare everything stable. Privately, they write frantic letters to Terra, demanding answers no one can give. Their third eyes ache with a pain they cannot understand. Long-endured whispers in the warp grow sharper, more focused, as if something in the Imperium senses the dying light and moves closer, hungrier. Some navigators go mad mid-voyage, screaming that the beacon is shivering. Others fall unconscious, their bodies locked in seizures as they attempt to stare into the psychic blaze and find only a dimming ember. Silence falls across their meeting chambers. Fear follows soon after. On Terra, the High Lords gather beneath the vaulted ceilings of the Senatorum Imperialis, and even their arrogance cannot hide the tension in their voices. Reports flood in from every segmentum, each worse than the last. Communications delayed, warp routes unstable, astropathic relays shorting out, yet no decree is issued. No explanation is offered. Each lord waits for someone else to speak first, because none of them are ready to voice the unspeakable possibility forming like frost inside their minds. The Emperor's strength is failing. The Golden Throne is dying. And with it, the Imperium itself. Deep below the shining marble halls of the Imperial Palace, in chambers where mortals rarely tread, the Adeptus Custodes begin to break their ancient silence. They do not speak in panic, they cannot. They do not allow themselves fear, because fear has no place in the gene-crafted guardians of the Emperor. But something more dangerous than fear begins to take root among them, uncertainty. They gather in the Hall of Whispers, debating in low, controlled tones. Some insist the fluctuations in the throne's power are temporary, the result of a malfunction in the arcane mechanisms that sustain the Emperor's half-life. Others argue the truth they do not want to accept: the Emperor's soul is withdrawing, fragment by fragment, slipping into a place even they cannot reach. The tech priests assigned to the throne do not share their doubts. They cannot. Their belief in the Omnitia is absolute. But beneath their metallic vox recitations and ritualistic chants, a different truth gnaws at them. The Golden Throne is beginning to resist their repairs. Its machine spirits groan with ancient resentment. Subsystems that have functioned flawlessly for 10 millennia begin shutting down, seemingly at random. Entire arrays go dark without explanation, only to return to life hours later. Their sacred instruments capture brief surges of distortion, echoes of psychic instability they have no language to describe. The Mechanicus documents everything. They explain nothing. They pray, and hope, and fear the answers buried in their data. Far from Terra, on the outer fringes of the Imperium, the consequences grow far more brutal. Ships vanish into the warp, swallowed whole by storms that did not exist days earlier. Isolated worlds lose contact with each other. Fleets attempt to establish supply lines only to find the warp twisting unpredictably, forcing them to abandon entire sectors. Imperial citizens, never told the truth, begin to sense something wrong. They cling tighter to the ecclesiarchy's teachings, flooding temples in numbers unseen since the age of apostasy. The priests feel the shift immediately: more prayers, more desperation, more fear, but when they call upon the Emperor in their rituals, the echo they expect does not come. The galaxy does not yet know the truth. Terra refuses to announce it. The Imperium is a wounded behemoth, too massive to change direction, too prideful to admit weakness, too dependent on a dying beacon to imagine life without it. But the signs are everywhere. The cracks are widening. The machine of empire is slowing, grinding under its own impossible weight. A quiet doom creeps across the stars, subtle enough to deny, but powerful enough to doom everything if ignored. And through it all, a single unspoken realization spreads through the halls of power, through the hidden chambers of the throne, through the echoing warp where dark things listen. The Emperor is slipping away, and no one knows how to stop it. The cracks in the Imperium do not merely widen, they rupture. What begins as delay, confusion, and whispered uncertainty quickly spirals into something far more dangerous. The Imperium of man, already stretched thin across a hostile galaxy, begins to fracture under the weight of a truth it refuses to acknowledge. The Emperor's light is fading, and the consequences bleed outward like a spreading wound. At first, the disintegration is political, subtle, buried beneath bureaucratic decrees and carefully sanitized reports. But the truth reveals itself in the reactions of those who rule the Imperium, and fear becomes the invisible force reshaping the galaxy. The High Lords of Terra, usually united only by self-interest, now divide into bitter factions. Some demand more resources to reinforce the Golden Throne, insisting that it can be repaired if enough blood and machinery are thrown at the problem. Others argue that the rumors of instability must be suppressed at all costs, fearing the chaos that would erupt if the galaxy knew the Emperor's power was failing. And then there are those, secretive, cold, ambitious, who see opportunity in the weakening of divine authority. They speak in coded phrases, exchange veiled threats, and begin to imagine an Imperium without the Emperor. The meetings grow louder, more hostile, more charged with paranoia. No one trusts anyone. Every word spoken in those marble chambers echoes with the desperate knowledge that something catastrophic is unfolding beneath their feet. Beyond Terra, the strain becomes impossible to hide. Segmentum commanders, responsible for ruling vast stretches of the galaxy, begin ignoring orders from the capital. Some claim the warp storms make communication impossible. Others claim emergency authority. A few simply stop replying at all. They begin acting independently, forming alliances with neighboring fleets and planetary governors. In several regions, small coalitions emerge, quiet attempts to create miniature empires within the larger one. Most still declare loyalty to Terra, but the truth becomes obvious. Loyalty now holds little meaning when the Astronomican flickers like a dying torch. The forged worlds of the Adeptus Mechanicus feel the shift with cold precision. Their calculations, their auguries, their data streams all tell the same story. The Golden Throne is failing, and with it, the stabilizing psychic resonance that has kept countless machines functional for millennia. Entire forges begin pushing out emergency armaments. Legios Titanicus march in silent readiness for threats unnamed. Some forge worlds comply with Terra's increasingly frantic requests. Others demand new concessions, new autonomy, new protections. A few speak openly of secession, their logic predicting that the Imperium's collapse is inevitable. The High Lords attempt to rein them in, but the message the Mechanicum returns is the one they fear most: prove your stability. Prove the Emperor endures, and they cannot. The Ecclesiarchy responds with fire. Across the galaxy, the priests of the imperial cult preach louder, more passionately, more desperately. They declare that the Emperor does not falter, that humanity falters. They call the warp disturbances a test of faith. They declare any who question the Emperor's health heretics. Pilgrimages to Terra increase tenfold as billions seek reassurance. The Ecclesiarchy's sermons fill the void left by the weakening of the Astronomican, but even their zeal cannot mask the trembling at the edges of their confidence. Some priests begin inventing new miracles, claiming divine visions or guidance. Others cling to old scripture, praying for signs that never come. A few quietly wonder why their prayers feel unanswered. Meanwhile, chaos senses weakness like sharks smell blood in water. Warp storms multiply and expand, no longer contained by the Emperor's stabilizing presence. Demonic incursions erupt in systems untouched for centuries. Worlds that once basked in the faint glow of imperial protection find themselves isolated in storm-racked void. The word-bearers, ancient architects of blasphemy, spread their gospel across the warp with renewed fervor. Their messages poison minds, infect dreams, and whisper the same taunting refrain into the ears of the desperate. Your false emperor rots upon his throne. His light grows dim, his age is ending. Ships traveling through the warp report phenomena worse than nightmares. Voices chanting in familiar tones, visions of the Golden Throne cracking apart, or worse, images of the Emperor standing and turning, but with hollow eyes filled with the stuff of chaos. These hallucinations spread panic among Imperial crews. Some refuse to travel, some refuse to sleep, some die clutching their heads, screaming that the warp is waiting for the final moment. And then comes a revelation that strikes deeper than all others. The Navigator houses report that their bloodlines are changing. The third eye, their sacred warp sense, begins to deteriorate in younger members. Some lose the ability to perceive the Astronomican entirely. Others develop grotesque mutations, uncontrolled warp sensitivity, or psychic blindness. The houses panic and seal their spires, fearing extinction of the one gift that has made human interstellar travel possible. Their messages to Terra turn from worried inquiries to frantic demands. If the Emperor's light dies completely, the Navigator gene line will perish with it. The Imperium tries to maintain order. It tries to project strength. But beneath the surface, everyone knows the truth. The Emperor is not simply silent. He is slipping. Humanity's god is fading, and the galaxy is beginning to fracture under the weight of a fear it cannot voice. The nightmare has begun. The cracks in the Imperium have grown into chasms, and the first tremors of open conflict stir quietly beneath the surface. Terra, the heart of humanity, is no longer the unshakable center it once was. Inside the palace, the Adeptus Custodes, once unwavering guardians of the Emperor, begin to question one another. Not in words that outsiders would hear, but in subtle exchanges of authority and command. Some believe the Emperor's life must be artificially prolonged at all costs, maintaining stasis even if it means sacrificing entire worlds to feed the throne. Others argue for contingency measures, protocols buried since Malcador's death, forbidden rituals meant to preserve the Imperium in the Emperor's absence. The debate is silent, deadly, and fractures even the most loyal. The Mechanicum, long subservient to the will of Terra, divides in kind. Some forged worlds insist that the Golden Throne is a sacred artifact that cannot be tampered with, fearing that improper intervention will destroy what little remains of the Emperor's psychic presence. Others advocate unlocking forbidden technologies, standard template constructs, and machines of ancient design that have not been used for 10 millennia. The ancient logic engines, the war machines, and the legions of Skitarii stand on the precipice of obedience or rebellion. Mars, normally the Imperium's most loyal heart, begins to murmur about autonomy and independence, citing the Emperor's silence as justification. In this chaos, the Space Marines, both Firstborn and Primaris, grapple with a crisis of faith and command. Chapters that once followed unbreakable edicts now debate openly the nature of loyalty. Some argue that the Emperor must remain central, that his absence is temporary, that the Imperium cannot survive without his guidance. Others quietly propose new hierarchies, leadership chosen by merit or power rather than by divine right. The seeds of a subtle civil war grow as chapters refuse coordination, patrols fail to rendezvous, and rumors of traitorous alliances spread across the stars. Even the most disciplined Astartes sense the danger. An empire without a god is an empire at war with itself. Elsewhere, the ecclesiarchy senses the mounting fracture and attempts to assert its influence. Priests and bishops preach obedience and divine destiny, but their sermons grow increasingly desperate, echoing across a galaxy already teetering on fear. Some factions of the clergy begin to manipulate chaos subtly, pitting planetary governors against one another under the guise of faith. Fanatical devotion becomes a weapon in a war that has no formal declaration. And as the Imperium teeters, propaganda becomes indistinguishable from panic, sermons become indistinguishable from screams, and faith becomes as dangerous as any sword. But the most insidious fractures are not political or religious, they are psychic. Warp storms, already increasing in number and intensity, begin tearing at the very fabric of human space. Demonic incursions become more frequent, and psychers feel the Emperor's failing presence as a vacuum that tempts and terrifies. The warp itself seems to ripple with glee, as though sensing the weakening of the mortal galaxy it has long ignored. Across systems, entire fleets vanish, fleets of pilgrims, traders, and military vessels alike. The outer sectors, already distant from Terra, fall into semi-anarchy. Isolated governors declare emergency powers. Warlords rise, some loyal, some pragmatic, all waiting for a chance to consolidate authority before the inevitable collapse of the old order. Amid this silent war, every world feels smaller, every mind more fragile. Humanity's soldiers fight not only enemies but uncertainty itself. No one knows where loyalty ends and survival begins. The galaxy teeters on the edge of a precipice. Every whispered conversation, every hesitation in command, every unheeded warning adds to the growing catastrophe. The Imperium is not yet openly at war with itself, but the first shots, quiet, hidden, calculated, are already being fired in boardrooms, on battle decks, and in secret corridors of power. And all the while, the Emperor sits silent, immobile, unseen, and almost forgotten in the heart of the palace. His light flickers, just barely enough to hold the galaxy together, but it is no longer a beacon, it is a countdown. The Imperium, vast and mighty, is unraveling quietly, and when the threads snap, nothing will be left to hold the galaxy against the coming storm. The silent civil war has begun. It is invisible, pervasive, and unstoppable. The first true collapse begins when the light of the Astronomican fails entirely. For centuries, humanity has relied on that single psychic lighthouse to navigate the perilous tides of the warp. Without it, star systems become islands, fleets vanish, and entire sectors are lost to darkness. The Emperor, once the unyielding center of everything, is no longer even a flicker. His will, his guidance, his immensity, all of it falters. Chaos, long held at bay by his unseen hand, surges forth with renewed hunger. Warp storms multiply, turning safe passages into death traps, tearing ships apart in moments, leaving nothing but psychic echoes of screaming crewmen. Humanity, vast and unprepared, feels the weight of an unforgiving void for the first time. And yet, the Imperium tries to hold together. Supply lines collapse, worlds starve, starships drift aimlessly in empty space, their crews succumbing to despair or madness. Planets once secure under Imperial protection are now preyed upon by everything that waits in the darkness. Tyrannid splinter fleets sense weakness and coordinate in ways previously unseen, striking systems simultaneously across multiple segmenta. Orc warlords smell opportunity, their WAAGH. Energy swelling unchecked, marauding across worlds that cannot defend themselves. Necron tomb worlds awaken silently, ancient engines stirring to reclaim what the galaxy has taken for granted. The collapse is both violent and invisible, unfolding simultaneously in every sector, leaving no corner untouched. Chaos does not hesitate. The four gods sense the Emperor's failure like a psychic pulse, and they respond with precision and fury. Demonic warbands erupt in the material universe, possessed by ambitions not seen for millennia. Entire cities vanish in moments, billions die, screaming into a void where no god's protection exists. The word-bearers spread visions of doom and triumph, their cults growing faster than any army, spreading the heretical gospel of the dying emperor to every isolated and terrified populace. Humanity's faith is now its own weapon, and its own weakness. The collapse is as much spiritual as it is physical, as much a tearing of belief as a tearing of worlds. The Space Marines, even in their gene-crafted perfection, feel the loss keenly. Chapters scattered across the galaxy act independently, attempting to protect what they can, reclaim what they can, survive where they must. Some chapters engage in preemptive strikes against neighbors suspected of treachery. Others fall into despair, their leaders questioning if survival itself is worth the cost when the Emperor no longer watches. Even the Primarchs, legacies, the eternal banners of human power, become faint memories, barely guiding those left alive through the madness. Humanity's finest warriors fight, not for glory or conquest, but simply to keep themselves from being erased by a galaxy that no longer bends to their control. On countless worlds, ordinary citizens are caught in the maelstrom. Entire civilizations vanish quietly under the dual assault of starvation and psychic terror. The blind and the weak die first, followed by those who cling desperately to fading orders, dogma, and superstition. Billions perish before a single enemy arrives, victims of collapse rather than conquest. And yet, somewhere, a handful of planets struggle to survive, holding together by ingenuity, stubbornness, and fear. The Tyranids advance with terrifying precision, sensing the death of the Emperor as though the galaxy itself were bleeding for them to feed upon. Hive fleets, previously scattered, begin coordinating for the first time, encircling systems, starving them of life before consuming them completely. Orcs, unchallenged, rampage across star systems in unstoppable waves. Necrons, awakening from millennia-long slumbers, deploy silent but devastating strikes against life-saturated planets. The galaxy is burning, yet there is no central fire, only a fractal apocalypse spreading in all directions at once. And still, in the heart of Terra, the Golden Throne glows faintly, a dying monument to everything humanity has ever worshipped. But even its flickering presence cannot contain the chaos. It cannot repair the warp. It cannot protect the stars. It cannot save the Imperium. The Emperor, silent and immobile, watches as the galaxy he built begins to fracture into 1,000 pieces, each piece falling toward an uncertain, terrifying future. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Imperium is not only losing. It is dying. Amid the chaos, a secret begins to surface, buried beneath layers of millennia-old bureaucracy, ritual, and silent conspiracies. Deep within the vaults of Terra, hidden beneath the palace, lies a record few have ever glimpsed, a prophecy written in the earliest days of the Imperium, crafted by Malkador the Sigillite himself. It speaks not of a waking emperor, not of a resurrection, not of salvation in the form humanity has always imagined. Instead, it whispers of an ending and a beginning, of the emperor's silence as an inevitable event, and of a contingency that has been waiting, patient and cold, for 10,000 years. The prophecy is terrifying in its simplicity. The emperor was never meant to wake. Not fully, not as the god the galaxy has worshipped. His existence, his immensity, was designed to create a framework for humanity's survival, not to oversee it indefinitely. The Emperor's life on the Golden Throne is not a promise, it is a test. And now, as his psychic light wanes, the Imperium finds itself forced to confront the truth it cannot deny: humanity must endure without him. In the hidden archives, custodes and tech priests alike discover instructions long buried. Rituals, systems, and devices intended to activate only if the throne's power failed completely. Malkador's handwriting is precise, meticulous, and chilling. It is not meant to preserve the Emperor, it is meant to preserve the Imperium, but in a new form, one stripped of divinity. The ritual, if completed, would create a beacon, a psychic lighthouse not fueled by godhood, but by machinery, calculation, and the distilled psychic essence of those who remain. It is humanity's last chance. But it comes at a cost. The Emperor cannot survive it, nor can his presence remain. The galaxy would gain guidance, yes, but only in the coldest, most pragmatic form. Rumors begin to leak. Factions on Terra argue bitterly over whether the ritual should be performed. The Custodes argue, each claiming knowledge of loyalty, each claiming to know the Emperor's true will. Some fear that activating the contingency is blasphemy beyond comprehension. Others insist that inaction guarantees annihilation. In hushed chambers, they debate the morality of death, of power, and of survival, knowing that the decision they make will echo across all of humanity for centuries to come. Meanwhile, across the Imperium, worlds starve, fleets vanish, and warp storms rage. The prophecy, unknown to billions, is humanity's final hope against the total collapse. The outer segmenta, the last bastions of loyal imperial governors, begin sending requests, not for aid, but for guidance. Yet there is no guidance to give, only an echo of something approaching. Somewhere beneath the throne, in hidden chambers where only the most loyal servants tread, the mechanism waits, silent and patient, ready to activate the last light protocol, the final contingency for a godless galaxy. And within the shadows of the warp, the four gods notice. The weakening of the Emperor is more than an opportunity, it is an invitation. Their demons stir, their whispers intensify, and their cults grow bolder. Chaos waits for the moment humanity activates the prophecy, knowing that even a beacon cannot stop the storm entirely. The galaxy is poised on a razor's edge. One wrong move, one failure, one delay, and not just the Imperium, but humanity itself, could vanish forever. For a moment, Terra is still. The Custodes pause. The Mechanicum hesitates. The throne flickers, barely alive, and the prophecy lies open, waiting for the hand brave, or desperate, enough to enact it. In that silence, one truth becomes undeniable: the Emperor's awakening is no longer the question. The question is whether humanity can survive his absence. And the answer is far from certain. The Emperor was never meant to wake, but something else might awaken in his place. The Golden Throne shudders one final time, a trembling monument to 10 millennia of sacrifice, war, and devotion. Across Terra, every priest, soldier, and Custodes feels it, not with their eyes, but in the depth of their minds, where faith and fear intertwine. The Emperor, silent and immobile for millennia, does not awaken. He does not rise. He does not speak. Instead, the throne's light, once a psychic sun capable of guiding fleets across the galaxy, dims completely, flickering out like a candle extinguished in the void. The heartbeat of the Imperium falters, and with it, the very consciousness of human civilization hangs in the balance. Custodes kneel, knowing the truth without words: the Emperor is gone. His presence, the unshakable core of humanity's existence, vanishes from the material world and from the Imperium. Psychers across the galaxy scream as the psychic void expands. Ships, suddenly untethered from the Astronomican, drift helplessly into the warp. Navigators shriek in horror as their third eyes struggle to perceive anything, and entire fleets vanish without trace. Billions stare at empty skies, waiting for a light that will never return. Chaos reacts instantly. The four gods roar in the warp, sensing the end of their greatest enemy's influence. Demons surge across the material universe, tearing at planets, fleets, and psychers alike. Cults grow with terrifying speed, emboldened by the Emperor's absence, preaching liberation, power, and destruction. Tyrannid splinter fleets, guided only by instinct and hunger, coordinate with deadly precision, striking worlds weakened by disarray. Orcs multiply their woes, exponentially, spreading violence and madness without opposition. Even the Necrons awaken silently, their ancient awareness detecting the collapse of the galaxy's psychic anchor, preparing to exterminate life with cold, methodical efficiency. The galaxy, once bound by faith and fear, is now a storm without a master. On Terra, the Custodes and remaining tech priests scramble to salvage what they can, but it is too late. The throne cannot be repaired. All attempts to stabilize its systems fail. The Emperor's body, once a living god, remains motionless and lifeless, an empty shell of power. Every measurement, every scan, every prayer confirms the same truth: he is gone. The silent watchers of the Imperium, a race bred and trained to endure any threat, cannot stop what is coming. They can only bear witness. Yet, in that utter void, a faint resonance stirs beneath the palace. Not the Emperor, not a god, something engineered, calculated, and waiting. The last light protocol hums softly, deep within hidden chambers, a contingency designed to guide humanity without divinity. It will not shine with the brilliance of the Emperor's psychic light, but it will function, a fragile beacon of hope amidst the maelstrom. The galaxy will survive, yes, but at a terrible cost. Guidance will come, but warmth, divinity, and certainty will be lost forever. For a moment, the universe holds its breath. Then the ripple spreads, felt across every planet, fleet, and warp-torn system. Chaos hisses, Tyranids roar, orcs bellow, and the Necrons stir. Humanity, bereft of its god, faces the vastness of the galaxy alone. The Emperor's death is not just an event, it is the end of an era, a rupture in reality, a signal to every force that life without his presence is vulnerable, mortal, and fleeting. And yet, somewhere in the silent depths of the warp, the Emperor's consciousness flickers, not fully awakened, not alive, but aware. A whisper passes through the psychic void, barely perceptible, like a memory brushing against eternity, survive. The galaxy trembles, and the age of gods gives way to the age of humanity alone. The Emperor is gone, the throne is dark, the galaxy trembles in the aftermath of his death, but humanity endures, not through faith, not through divinity, but through cold, unyielding necessity. Deep beneath the golden throne, in secret chambers long hidden from all but the most loyal, the last light protocol awakens. A faint, steady pulse hums through ancient machinery, casting a new form of guidance into the void. It is not divine, it is not warm, it is precise, calculating, and mercilessly efficient. For the first time, humanity navigates the stars not by God, but by algorithm, psychic resonance, and the ingenuity of mortals who have learned to survive without miracle. Terra itself becomes the nucleus of a new order. The High Lords, shaken by the Emperor's death and the revelations of the prophecy, form a council unlike any seen before, the Council of the Last Light. Its members are chosen not by lineage, wealth, or faith, but by skill, vision, and the capacity to endure unbearable responsibility. Custodes, tech priests, and surviving leaders work in tense cooperation, setting aside centuries of tradition for the sake of survival. Orders are given not in the name of a god, but in the name of humanity itself, and for the first time, obedience is rooted in reason rather than worship. Across the Imperium, space marines adapt to a reality without the Emperor's presence. Chapters convene, selecting new leaders and establishing chains of command independent of divine mandate. Firstborn and Primaris alike begin to rethink the purpose of loyalty, forging unity from pragmatism rather than faith. Battles are still fought, systems still defended, but the focus is no longer on upholding a divine empire, it is on keeping humanity alive against forces that would gladly snuff it out. The lessons of the Emperor's absence are brutal, but they are understood. Survival demands clarity, decisiveness, and sacrifice. The Mechanicum, too, evolves. Forged worlds unite under the Mechanicum Concord, a coalition formed to maintain essential production, coordinate defenses, and stabilize the Last Light Protocol. Religious devotion to the Emperor is no longer required for operation, logic, precision, and ruthless efficiency govern their actions. Machines hum in synchronization with psychic beacons, fleets chart courses once unimaginable, and humanity's engineers finally understand that their god is no longer a guide, they are the guides now. The galaxy's survival rests on mortal hands alone. Yet, despite this fragile stability, uncertainty persists. Chaos, Tyranids, orcs, and Necrons all press against the edges of the Imperium, testing the limits of its new order. The last light beacon provides guidance, but it cannot protect from ambition, greed, or madness. Planets struggle, fleets risk annihilation, and billions continue to die, not to divine wrath, but to the consequences of a galaxy that has learned no mercy. The survival of humanity is tenuous, fragile, and dependent on the ingenuity of the living. And still, in the silent depths of the throne's chambers, the faint pulse of the last light hums steadily, a reminder that even without godhood, humanity can endure. It is not salvation, it is not triumph, it is simply survival, the raw, terrifying, and beautiful fact that life persists even when its creators fall silent. The Imperium has been reborn, but it is reborn as something new, something less certain, something dangerous, and yet, still alive. In this rebirth, one truth remains crystal clear: the Emperor will not awaken. And yet, humanity has found a way to survive in his absence, a testament to its resilience, its ambition, and its stubborn, indomitable will. The galaxy is no longer guided by divinity, but by the unflinching determination of mortals who refuse to yield, even when the stars themselves seem poised against them. Even as the Last Light Protocol hums across the Imperium, providing a fragile psychic thread to guide ships and coordinate defenses. The galaxy teeters on the edge of annihilation. Chaos does not rest. The four gods, enraged by the Emperor's absence, stir armies, inspire cults, and shatter worlds. Demonic incursions erupt across sectors once thought secure. Entire systems are swallowed in psychic storms, their populations annihilated or twisted into instruments of destruction. The whispers of Tzeentch weave through the minds of the desperate, promising power and salvation to those willing to surrender. Khorne's bloodthirst spreads like wildfire, igniting planets with endless war. Nurgle's rot creeps silently, infecting populations, weakening defenses, eroding hope. Slaanesh's pleasure and pain intertwine, tempting the elite to betrayal and decadence. The Imperium is besieged on every front, and survival is no longer merely a struggle, it is a gauntlet. Xenos races, long held at bay by the Emperor's unyielding presence, seize the opportunity. Tyrannid fleets converge toward the Sol system, guided by instinct and an unerring sense of vulnerability. Orc warbands erupt across the outer segmenta, WAs, swelling with newfound ferocity, their sporadic attacks coalescing into coordinated campaigns. Necron dynasties awaken, their silent engines of death marching on worlds rich with life. The galaxy itself feels alive with predation, a predator-saturated ecosystem where humanity is no longer the apex. The vacuum left by the Emperor has invited every threat, every predator, every ancient killer into the open, and the Imperium is barely able to respond. Humanity, despite the Last Light Protocol, cannot fight on every front. Fleets are stretched thin, sectors isolated, worlds abandoned to chaos or conquest. Civilizations cling to the beacon like children to a candle in a storm. Space Marines patrol, warlords rise, governors seize power, but the unity of the Imperium is fractured and tenuous. Every success is temporary, every victory comes at a staggering cost. Communication is reliable in some sectors, unreliable in others, and utterly absent in the farthest reaches. The galaxy feels endless, the enemy infinite, and humanity infinitesimal in comparison. Yet, despite the chaos, Terra remains the fulcrum of human resilience. The Council of the Last Light struggles to coordinate a response, balancing pragmatism against desperation. Plans are drawn, fleets mobilized, defenses reinforced, but it is always a step behind. Every move is reactive, every decision haunted by the knowledge that billions of lives depend on choices made in fractured corridors of power. The galaxy waits with bated breath, sensing that the coming storm will decide not just the fate of the Imperium, but the fate of all human civilization. In the shadows of the warp, the Emperor's death is celebrated and cursed simultaneously. Chaos sees opportunity, the Xenos sense weakness, humanity clings to the fragile light it has been given. The galaxy teeters on the knife's edge between survival and extinction, and every heartbeat, every ship, every mind feels the tension. One misstep, one lapse, one failure, and the fragile rebirth of the Imperium could shatter, leaving nothing but ash, ruin, and the triumphant laughter of enemies long restrained. The stage is set, the galaxy waits, humanity is alone, and the brink has never been closer. The Emperor does not wake. His throne remains empty of life, his light extinguished. Across the galaxy, humanity trembles in a moment suspended between despair and defiance. Yet the Last Light Protocol, hidden for 10,000 years beneath the Golden Throne, activates fully. Its pulse spreads through the warp and across the stars, faint yet unwavering. It is not warmth, it is not godhood, it is order, guidance, and survival distilled into pure function. Humanity has no divine savior, but it has a lifeline, fragile and cold, to cling to amidst the encroaching darkness. Worlds begin to stabilize, just enough to endure. Fleets lost in the warp are guided back, some intact, some broken, but all returned by the unseen hand of a machine-driven will. The Mechanicum, Space Marines, and remaining leaders coordinate with relentless precision. The galaxy is no longer united by faith, nor fear, nor loyalty, it is bound by necessity, by reason, and by the instinct to survive. The Imperium has changed. It has no god, no divine throne, no unbroken chain of worship. But it endures. Chaos roars in frustration. Xenos prey on the weak. Tyrannid fleets advance, Orc WAs spread, and Necron tomb worlds awaken, but humanity fights, adapts, and survives. The cost is unimaginable. Billions have perished. Entire star systems are lost. Yet the last light holds, a flicker of hope amidst the storm. The galaxy is scarred, forever changed, but it lives. In the shadow of the Golden Throne, the custodes and tech priests stand silently, witnessing the outcome of centuries of sacrifice. They know the truth. The Emperor will not return. The god of humanity is gone. And yet, in the vacuum he leaves, mortals have found their own strength, their ingenuity, their courage, and their will to endure. The Imperium is no longer a theocracy, no longer a symbol of divine perfection. It is raw, human, fragile, and alive. Somewhere in the warp, the echo of the Emperor lingers, a faint, imperceptible whisper, perhaps a memory, perhaps a warning: survive, even without me. And humanity does. It rebuilds, recalibrates, and perseveres, not for a god, not for glory, but for life itself. The galaxy is still a dangerous, hostile place, and threats will always remain. But the story of the Imperium is not yet over. It has learned a terrible lesson: faith alone cannot save an empire. Only the will to endure can. The Emperor never woke, the Imperium nearly fell, and yet, against all odds, life continues, guided by the last light, human, relentless, and unbroken. The stars watch silently as a new chapter begins, uncertain, fragile, and charged with the terrifying promise of survival. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.